Chamberlain seemed almost a mythical figure, the Paul Bunyan of basketball. But his stature was so huge, his accomplishments so mind-boggling, that no fiction writer could have invented him. During his remarkable standards that few other players could even dream of approaching. This week, it's the legendary Wilt Chamberlain on Vintage NBA.
Yes, basketball has changed. It's always been a great game, but now it has a new spirit.
He dunks like Dr. J. He might be the new Iceman.
The modern day Wilt Chamberlain.
He looked like Magic Johnson.
The future has arrived.
You are watching what greatness is all about.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vintage NBA. I'm Robin Roberts, and for the next hour, we'll profile one of the most dominant players the game has ever seen, Wilt Chamberlain. He ruled the middle for 14 NBA seasons. By the time he was through, he had changed the game forever and left behind a staggering list of achievements. While most of today's players never got to see Chamberlain in his prime, they are well aware of just how great he was. And it's interesting to get their take on Wilt. So this week, we turn the chair over to the Minnesota Timberwolves' Kevin Garnett for his thoughts on the man known as the Big Dipper.
If you hit 100 points, these days in 1999/2000, can you imagine the phone calls you get? Well, what you think about? What you eat? Woo! Hey, Steve! Can you imagine your teammates, your coach?
This is Kevin Garnett's basketball game.
Hopefully it's the finals. This is the deciding game. I hit 100 points and we win. The whole universe, the whole planet Earth would be in an uproar. Cool cat. Sit back. Young Wilt to still.
167 to 146. In the kingdom. He
100 points is crazy. 100 points is not even real.
the most amazing scoring performance of all time. 100 points.
I don't see anybody scoring 100. You know, you see Michael when he was scoring 69, 63, 45. I mean, yeah, that's amazing.
Most field goals, 36, record for Chamberlain. Most points and a half, 59, Chamberlain, a record. Most shots taken, 63.
Man, he was stroke of nature, huh? I don't see anybody doing it no time soon. Nobody.
That's right, Chamberlain has connected for 100 points.
Yo, this is KG, young Wilt the Stilts in here perpetrating as the man himself. When I played Wilt in the movie Rebound, it had a part with a lot of respect to it.
To score 100 points in an NBA game. Wilt, the steal!
It had like a little cocky part to it.
Kick right, go! Kick right! Kick right! Welcome to the big league, schoolboy.
I had to wear the little shorts and really show like all my legs, and then I had to do the stretched out finger roll over the head. But I had a lot of fun with it too. It was a real cool part, and I had fun. I met him in Cleveland. Seen him. I'm gonna tell you how it was too, man. They was sitting there, just cooling, just smooth, man. I was like, Wilt Chamberlain said right there, if I don't say nothing now, I'm never gonna probably get this close to him again. Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Mr. Chamberlain? He's like, hey, young fella, how you doing? I was like, oh, I was like a little kid, man. I was like, yo, just want you to know, man, hey, I love you, man. I worship the ground you walk. Oh, thanks, man.
Wilt Chamberlain, most valuable player in the National Basketball Association this year.
I wonder, does he still have his old jerseys? Like, there was so much I wanted to ask him too, man. Like, you know what really just sparked that within him to just go out and just be like 150, 48 a night, assists, get it out of here, rebound. Like, I'm a curious person. I'll sit back and I'll soak everything he said in the end. I'll just soak it all up.
So Kevin is now hard at work preparing all his questions for the next time he meets Wilt. Here's one question, for example. How many NBA records does Chamberlain still hold? We'll have the answer and much more about Wilt's illustrious career when Vintage NBA returns in just a moment.
I came to the NBA as a defensive player. I used to like to go up and grab balls right out of the air. So everyone was afraid of my defensive game, more so than my scoring game.
I think there will be a period of orientation for me, of course, like it is for every newcomer in the NBA, but I think in the long run I'll be able to handle myself man-to-man with almost anyone in the league.
If I was conscious about thinking about, is anyone going to break this record? I'd have probably put that record way out of sight.
That was about the only record Wilt didn't put out of sight. The numbers he put up are simply astounding. A generation after he retired, Chamberlain still holds 56 NBA records, including his famous 100-point game, and averaging 50 points over an entire season. He not only rewrote the record book, but also the rule book. The NBA widened the lane because of his inside dominance. Not that it did much to stop him. Wilt overwhelmed opponents on his way to one of the greatest careers in basketball history.
Chamberlain was a giant. You have no idea how physically imposing he was.
Strongest basketball player that ever lived.
He still inspires awe among those who watched him play or even heard about him. And even to this day, Wilt Chamberlain cast an enormous shadow.
Here we are, 40-some years later, and his name is still dominant in the record books.
A celebrated star at Philadelphia's Overbrook High School, Chamberlain captured the nation's attention at the University of Kansas. But when he entered the NBA in 1959, few could have imagined the kind of impact he would have.
I came to the NBA as a defensive player. I used to like to go up and grab balls right out of the air. So everyone was afraid of my defensive game, more so than my scoring game.
I think there will be a period of orientation for me, of course, like it is for every newcomer in the NBA, but I think in the long run I'll be able to handle myself man-to-man with almost anyone in the league.
And from the outset, it was clear that Wilt would dominate scoring like no one else before him.
He averaged 50 points a game one season. That's his average, 50, every game.
His stature grew to epic proportions on March 2nd, 1962. In a game against the New York Knicks, Chamberlain did the unthinkable.
Whoever believed that anyone would score 100 points in one ball game, it was done tonight by Wilt Chamberlain.
I think they had no way to compare what I was doing. It was so far out of the realm of believability, if you such a word, that they had no way to compare. I mean, they'd come to a game, and people came to the game, they said, well, he's capable of scoring 100 points. And every night they were looking for 100 points.
Wilt Chamberlain of the San Francisco Warriors, the league's leading scorer for the last 5 years. Chamberlain made nearly 3,000 points during the last season, averaging over 36 points per game. The league's deadliest man under the boards.
But while no one had proven they could stop him one-on-one, Bill Russell and the Boston Celtics were clearly Chamberlain's toughest opponents. While Wilt was breaking scoring records, Russell was revolutionizing the art of defense and was every bit the dominant force that Chamberlain was. Their meetings would produce one of the greatest rivalries in the history of sports.
Go over the history of the NBA, the first 50 years, that's probably as dramatic a matchup as you've ever seen anytime. It was like two titans of the game meeting, and you'd have headlines, Russell versus Chamberlain, and you know, the papers and the fans and everyone played this up.
Wilt was a Paul Bunyan figure, mythic in what he could personally do. Russell, on the other hand, was part of the team, woven into the team more than anybody else ever in any sport whatsoever. It was just two entirely different ways. It was like I think when Impressionism first came into painting, and Russell was the great Impressionist painter, and Chamberlain was simply the realist, the best we'd ever had in simple, literal terms.
While he often had the edge in their individual matchups, Chamberlain was no match for Russell's Celtics. With their superior teams, Boston usually sent Wilt home in defeat.
You know, when that happens, people start to look at one guy as the one who can't win, the other one who can win. Well, Wilt Chamberlain's teams were capable of winning, but they just didn't have the ability to beat those Celtic teams.
It was terribly unfair to brand him a loser. Runner-up to the public is loser. But to the people involved in the game, if you're playing in the last game played that year, you had a hell of a year.
In 1967, Wilt was able to exorcise the demons of his past defeats to Boston. His 76ers knocked the Celtics out of the playoffs en route to winning the NBA championship. But despite winning that title and another with the Lakers in 1972, Chamberlain could never seem to win the public's affection.
The expectations that people had on Wilt sometimes weren't realized because they literally expected him to just win every basketball game he played in because of the magnitude of the man.
His accomplishments on the court are so staggering they almost seem mythical. But the reality was quite clear that Wilt was the game's most awesome figure.
Wilt Chamberlain was the Goliath of his time. He was too big for the game of his time. He had too many tools and too much arrogance for his time. And that would be what I would think of Wilt Chamberlain.
Some of Wilt's records may never be broken. One year he averaged 48.5 minutes per game, meaning he played just about every minute of the season, and overtimes too. And he grabbed 55 rebounds in one game. But his most amazing mark is that, yes, 100-point game. No one's even come near it, except for one player, Wilt himself, who once scored 78. But basketball was just one aspect of his life. And up next, we'll look at the many different sides of Wilt Chamberlain. Later, we'll relive one of his greatest moments, leading the Sixers to the '67 championship. But first, a look at what else was making news back in 1967. Welcome back, everyone, to Vintage NBA. We know Wilt Chamberlain was a two-time NBA champion and a scoring champion, but how about Wilt Chamberlain, heavyweight champion? It never happened, but the thought did at least cross his mind. As we log on to NBA.com on the Vintage NBA page, it says that Wilt signed on to fight Muhammad Ali, but the deal fell through. But it's not as far-fetched as you might think, because Chamberlain was a tremendous all-around athlete. He played pro volleyball, played tennis and polo, and in high school and college, he was a star in track and field.
17,000 are on hand for the 48th Drake Relays, one of the Midwest Blue Ribbon track events. Don Stewart, SMU, clears the high jump at 6'6 1/4, followed by basketball star Wilt Chamberlain of Kansas, who matches the mark and wins the coin toss for first place.
Clearly, Wilt was a man of many talents, and they were not limited to sports. He also set new standards with his performance as the world's tallest bellhop. Wilt worked at a hotel in the Catskills one summer while in high school, where he gave summer vacationers an early glimpse of the famous Dipper Dunk. After leaving the University of Kansas and before entering the NBA, Chamberlain toured one full season with the Harlem Globetrotters. And speaking of the Trotters, Wilt has dabbled in the horse trade. He's a bit too big to be a jockey, but does have a keen interest in harness racing. After leaving the Lakers in 1973, he became player coach of the San Diego Conquistadors of the ABA. And like many basketball greats of his time, Chamberlain was at the cutting edge in the world of fashion and also endorsements. As Wilt was rising to fame in the 60s, Madison Avenue took notice. He became one of the first NBA stars to be prominently featured in commercials.
It's TWA's new ambassador class to the East Coast, with enough room for anybody.
Even if you're 7'1" or taller. Taller. Little.
So it turns out Wilt could do a little acting as well, and once he even appeared in the film Conan the Barbarian. Of course, his greatest performances were on the court, where he was larger than life. And while Chamberlain dominated the NBA in scoring in the 1960s, other famous stars were dominant as well. 1 year before Wilt scored 100 points, New York Yankee Roger Maris hit a then-record 61 home runs, a record that stood for 37 years. As leaders of the British invasion, both the Beatles and the Rolling Stones ushered rock and roll into a new era. And the godfather of soul, James Brown, continued to reinvent rhythm and blues and helped invent the new sound of funk. As for Wilt, his incredible feats made him seem almost superhuman, but even Superman has a weakness. And for Chamberlain, it was free throw shooting. He couldn't seem to get the hang of it. He'd get letters of advice from fans, psychiatrists, even hypnotists. Wilt said he once saw a psychiatrist about the problem, and by the end of their sessions, the psychiatrist was a better foul shooter than he was. But Wilt was doing everything else right in 1967, and so were the rest of the Sixers. They were practically unbeatable. And up next, we'll remember Chamberlain's first NBA title. Wilt Chamberlain began his career in his hometown of Philadelphia with the Warriors. Then he found himself heading west when the franchise moved to San Francisco. But in 1965, Wilt was traded back home, this time to the 76ers, and he became part of one of the best teams in NBA history. Chamberlain teamed up with stars like Chet Walker, Hal Greer, and the Kangaroo Kid, Billy Cunningham. And in 1967, they were in a league by themselves, going 68-13, a record at the time. In a special airwave archive, we've dug up a year-end highlight film about Wilt and the NBA champion Sixers.
Wanting a world championship is one thing. Getting it is another. Coach Alex Hannum explains the route to the playoffs.
I think that we achieved something in our win-loss record over regular season play that will never be equaled again. Losing only 13 games in a long NBA schedule is something that I believe will be virtually impossible for any team to do again. The thing that made this team so great, I think, was a natural maturing of the whole team together. We remember that I coached some of these players up in Syracuse. I coached against Wilt Chamberlain when he was down here in Philadelphia with the old Warriors. I coached Wilt Chamberlain out in San Francisco. Now I had the opportunity, when all of these players are back together again, maturing together, getting better year by year. And so I sum it up by saying that it's the natural maturing of this talent.
Much comment has been made on the change in Chamberlain's style. From loner to an integral part of a five-man team is quite a jump, even for Wilt. Alex Hannum.
This year, I was fortunate to take over a team that had the talent that allowed Wilt to play the style of ball he did this year. It was not necessary for him to score in order to win. It wasn't necessary for him to carry the whole load offensively.
Coach Hannum analyzes the rest of his team.
Hal Greer, I think, is one of the three best middle-distance jump shooters in the history of the game of basketball. Hal can hit that middle-distance jumper. He gives us offense at all times. Had, I believe, his greatest year this year. Luke Jackson, I believe, is capable of playing a great center position, but when you're playing on the same team with Wilt Chamberlain, you've got to adapt yourself to playing that forward position, which is exactly what Luke did. We had the most powerful, awesome side as far as rebounding and strength on the front line of any team in the history of professional basketball. Wally Jones, there were some question marks about Wally before the season started, but it didn't take him long to dispel any doubts about his being a great pro basketball player. When the blue chips were in the pot, he hit, and he hit consistently. Chet Walker, his great shooting, his great driving, his great defense, one of the truly great all-around ball players and cornermen in this game. Billy Cunningham has been known as instant offense. He became the 76ers' sixth man. He comes in cold, and he just tears the other team apart. When he's scoring and driving to the basket, which is his game, the name, the Kangaroo Kid, really tells the story, because this is exactly what he is, and he gives us that offensive punch that we need so many times to get us going when things get a little bit dull. Matty Gukas, in his first year as a pro, was of a question mark early in the year, but arrived much sooner than most of us thought he would.
As to his own contribution to the team,
well, I would like to think that I had something to do with putting the whole thing together.
But to become world champions, you must beat the Western Division winner, the San Francisco Warriors. It's that simple. But there are two giant complications. A 6'11" center named Nate Thurmond, and a superstar shooter named Rick Barry. Coach Alex Hannum gives a capsule description of these two problems.
Rick Barry, in my opinion, is one of the most outstanding, exciting young ball players to come along in many years. Rick has the ability to put the ball in the basket. He, coupled with fellows that can play the defense and get the ball for him, puts together the type of combination that is going to win championship. Nate Thurmond is a center that is starting to rival both Chamberlain and Russell as far as his ability, offensively and defensively. And we have found that you don't win big in the NBA unless you have that really great center.
With Thurmond rivaling Chamberlain under the boards and Rick Barry hitting from all over, the Western Division champs fought the 76ers to a 3-2 count. The place, San Francisco. The time, late in the third quarter of a game that's been perspiringly close all the way. A scoring battle in the first quarter set an NBA playoff record. But now the Warriors have pulled ahead. Rookie Matt Gukas has been inspiring, but Rick Barry and Nate Thurmond have been sensational. Billy Cunningham explains why the top scorer in the playoffs is so hard to stop.
I attempted to guard Rick Barry, but he is by far the toughest forward in the NBA to guard because he is in constant movement.
Watch out, Bill. So close, and yet so far away. 3 in the bag. All you need is one more. Tension, tension, tension.
Now it looked again like we were going to let something slip away from us, and we were going to have to take it back to Philadelphia.
Late, very late in the fourth quarter, the 76ers finally lead by 114 to 113. But there's always Rick Barry to pull the Warriors ahead. San Francisco leads. Chamberlain is fouled. Ex-Celtic Bill Sharman, now the Warrior coach, relaxes, knowing Wilt's weakness on the foul line. But it's clutch time now. The 76ers take the lead by 1, but can they hold it? Luke Jackson is fouled under the basket. Luke shoots, misses. Chamberlain grabs the rebound. The 76ers have the lead and hold it by 1 until 15 seconds are left. Barry has the ball. Walker guarding.
I got a lot of help from Chamberlain, and between both of us, we managed to stop him, and we managed to force him into a bad shot. And Luke Jackson got the rebound, and I think that was the turning point of the game.
San Francisco substitutes Tom Masheri for Jim King for the jump ball with Luke Jackson. The Warriors gained 4 inches on the exchange. Chet Walker gets the tap and is fouled. Chet makes the last 2 points, and the Philadelphia 76ers now have a crown. Chet.
We played so many games during one season, and right away was just another win. But then the next day, it really came down on me. And I realized for the first time that we were the world champion. And it was just nothing in the world could compare with the way I felt at the time.
Jack Ramsey.
It's not easily done. It's a rigorous schedule. The playoffs are hard fought. And the best team does win this. And we were the best team, and we won it.
Alex Hannum.
We knew we could do it. We knew we wanted to do it. We felt that this was the year that we were going to do it.
Chet sums it up.
And we did it the hard way. We did it on the road. It's a great thing to be world champs because you're not only the best basketball team in the United States, you are the best basketball team in the whole world, and that includes Russia and China and every place. And you really don't feel the impact of the whole thing until you Like some nights you sit around or you lie down in bed and you think about it. And then you realize that you are the best. It's a great feeling. Nothing you compare with.
So Wilt comes home with his first NBA title and helps seal the outcome with underhanded free throws of all things. Must have picked that up from Rick Barry. That was the first year Chamberlain did not win the scoring title. But he didn't have to score as much because he had such a great supporting cast. 1 year later, however, Wilt would be on the move once again. He was traded to Los Angeles, where he'd have yet another storybook season in 1972. You'll see it next. But first, a little something to ponder from that year. The 1967 Sixers and the 1972 Lakers were two of the greatest NBA teams ever. And it's no coincidence that they both had Wilt Chamberlain as their center. By 72, Wilt was heading into the twilight of his career. At age 35, he was no longer a big-time scorer, but he was still a force leading the league in rebounding. And he helped lead the Lakers into the history books. They won 33 consecutive games that year, a pro sports record. Here's a look at Wilt and the Lakers in another highlight film straight out of the Airwave archive.
I think, Coach, one of the best plays you get the pick and roll on is 22. Yeah. Where you get the ball in close, you take one step in, and you like Elvin Cannon and I drop the pass. You see? Yeah. As opposed to passing it over there. Well, I should make that clear then. If the pass is not there, if somebody else is open, or if you got a shot before you complete the play, take it.
When Wilt Chamberlain became coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, it was obvious from the start that he meant business. Chamberlain was surrounded by some of the greatest names in the NBA: Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, and Captain Elgin Baylor. But unexpectedly, after only 9 games, the 13-year veteran retired.
He wound it up in a blaze of glory and average career-wise 27 points a game, the 3rd greatest scorer in the history of the game, at only 6'5", the 4th greatest rebounder in the history of the game, 10 times an All-Star. Ladies and gentlemen, to make a presentation of his jersey to the Laker owner, Mr. Jack Kent Cook, here is Captain Elgin Baylor.
Elgin's jersey was retired, and young Jim McMillan, number 5, took over. But after a fast start, the Lakers slowed down. West and Keith Erickson were hurt, and it wasn't until a seemingly routine game against the Baltimore Bullets that the Laker fortunes turned. Behind Wilt Chamberlain's rebounding and Gail Goodrich's scoring, the Lakers led by 4 points after 3 quarters. The Lakers held on to win, and little did anyone realize that more than 2 months would pass before they would lose another basketball game. Records fell and then swelled into a championship roar. The Los Angeles Lakers were off to the finest year ever played in the NBA. After the initial win against Baltimore, Los Angeles picked up momentum until the NBA win streak was in sight. These were team victories now, a team that included a healthy Jerry West. But perhaps their biggest reason for success was number 13, Wilt Chamberlain, whose awesome domination on defense inspired all the Lakers and often started what was to become a familiar sight. At home or away, the Laker fast break. Number 52, Happy Harrison, was frequently on the receiving end of the break pass. And this incredible show wasn't limited to the starting 5. Newcomer John Q. Trapp came off the bench to spark 2 of the victories. Big Leroy Ellis back with the Lakers, and number 12, Pat Riley, seemed to be everywhere at once. And when the ball got to a 3rd new Laker, Flynn Robinson, it was instant points.
Consecutive wins 18 and 19 were achieved, and Bill Sharman and his assistant, Casey Jones, plotted for more. Los Angeles tied the record when they beat Phoenix in overtime for win number 20. Now the record for the most consecutive wins, held by the Milwaukee Bucks, was on the line against the always dangerous Atlanta Hawks. The Lakers poured it on, and they were coasting when Pistol Pete Maravich brought the crowd to its feet, and the Lakers back to reality. With just over a minute to play, the Hawks were closing in, and the record was in jeopardy. It was time for another Laker extra effort, and they got it. Leroy Ellis broke free, and Jerry West hit him for the biggest dunk of the year. And Los Angeles finally pulled away. And then the lightning-quick hands of West struck again, and Atlanta was finished. The record was theirs, and the game ball went to Coach Bill Charman, the master architect of the new Los Angeles Lakers. Most thought the win streak might end at 21, but it continued, and the attendance grew. Packed houses greeted them at home as well as on the road. The Lakers were now a national sensation. Each game was tougher than the last, and as the pressure built, every opponent wanted to be the one to end the streak. Now, 11 wins after the record 21st, the Lakers were in Atlanta to prove to Hawk coach Richie Guerin win number 21 was no fluke, and they did just that. Coach Sharman had his team ready, and they literally ran circles around the erratic Hawks. Jim McMillan was the game tie scorer with 26 points, and this convincing and unprecedented 33rd straight win now took on more importance as the Lakers traveled to Milwaukee to face the world champion Bucks and their avid fans. The Lakers had already gone the entire month of November and December undefeated, and they certainly didn't want their streak to end here. As the second quarter began, Los Angeles had taken a 2-point lead, and apparently Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was getting frustrated by Wilt's play and the tension of the game. However, Happy's offense couldn't be sustained as he and the other Lakers turned ice cold. They shot a miserable 29% in the first half, while Milwaukee's young guards turned it on. It wasn't until the fourth quarter that Los Angeles countered the Bucks' attack. Flynn Robinson came in and not only whittled down the Bucks' lead, but he did it mostly inside, over Jabbar himself. Robinson seemed to be the spark that the Lakers had been looking for. But when he had helped cut the Bucks' lead to 4, the game's complexion changed. The Lakers could do nothing right, while Milwaukee did nothing wrong. Los Angeles had come from behind before, but the swarming Bucks were just too much. This time, anyway. With the season at the halfway point, it was inevitable that the amazing win streak would eventually be stopped. And appropriately, it was the world champions who ended it with style January 9th, 1972.
There was no aura of invincibility because they're not this good. You know, so look, the Sixers, we knew we were the best. And we had that feeling of invincibility. Never the Lakers. Believe me, it was just a feeling of elation.
You know, it was a year when everything seemed to just work perfectly. It was like a breakthrough for us. It was that one opening in the clouds that allowed us to win that year. And in looking back and competing in all the other championship series that I competed in, there was never that opening there for us to win. This just seemed really easy to do. It seemed like we were destined to win.
In 1972, Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, and the Lakers won 69 games. That broke the record set by Wilt's Sixers team. But it wouldn't have meant very much without an NBA title. And since moving to L.A., the Lakers have been to the finals 7 times with nothing to show for it. They returned in '72 for a rematch against the Knicks, who had beaten them 2 years earlier in the finals. But this time, the Lakers would not be denied.
For the 8th time in 12 years, the Lakers were in the NBA Finals. But standing in the way were the Eastern Conference champions, New York Knickerbockers. They came to town with the sky-high bombs of center Jerry Lucas and a lot more. The Knicks are the most disciplined of the league's teams, and with stars like Bill Bradley and Walt Frazier at every position, they won Game 1 very easily. But with the uncanny assist of Jerry West and the scoring of Chamberlain and Gail Goodrich, the Lakers bounced back and took the next 2. In New York for Game 4, the championship pressure was mounting. Happy Harrison's spectacular rebound late in the game took care of a crucial Knicks scoring opportunity. But then Dancing Harry tried to take care of Harrison and the rest of the Lakers all by himself. The hex was put on to the East Coast superfans, but the Lakers weren't about to be distracted. Only 30 seconds remained, and Los Angeles decided to set up for one shot. The score was tied, 99-99. As the clock ticked away, the ball went to the greatest scorer in playoff history, Jerry West, and all of New York held its breath. Mr. Clutch delivered again, and with 11 seconds left, the Knicks called time, trailing now by 2 big points. Whatever play the Knicks called couldn't have been the one that took place. Dave DeBusschere forced an off-balance shot that missed, but an amazing Walt Frazier tip-in with 3 seconds left tied the game again. The Lakers didn't hit in those 3 seconds, and Game 4 went into overtime. Coach Sharman knew the Knicks had to win here to stay close to the Lakers in the series. So, when Wilt Chamberlain controlled another big tip, he breathed easier. The overtime period proved to be almost anticlimactic, as the Lakers went right to work. Number 5, Jim McMillan, who had been cold in regulation play, suddenly got hot, and now a quiet New York crowd watched their heroes fall behind. For the 3rd game in a row, Knick coach Red Holzman watched his team go down to defeat. The Lakers returned to Los Angeles just 1 game away from their first world championship. As they headed from the Forum locker room, the Lakers should have been elated, but they were as apprehensive as their fans because Wilt Chamberlain had a badly sprained right wrist, and even if he could play, no one knew how effective he would be. The packed Forum gave them a thundering ovation, and all eyes watched as the big fellow gave the first test to his bandaged hand. Laker fans thought this was an omen, and they went wild. Despite the defense of Harrison and 14 rebounds by the ever-present Chamberlain, the score of Game 5 was tied at halftime. It was now or never for both teams, but it was the Lakers who jumped ahead. They led by 7 points well into the 4th quarter, and the New Yorkers began to hurry their shots. Their uncanny long-range accuracy deserted them, and the Lakers started running. Los Angeles was on its way to the title, and their championship star fans were delirious with joy. While on the court, the team continued to pour it on. At last it was apparent the Lakers had clinched the championship, and Bill Sharman could take out his starters. A pat for the playoffs' most valuable player. A handshake for the man in the clutch. It was all over but the enjoying. New York's first team got a standing ovation for their determined performance. There was no question about it. Wherever you look, the Lakers were number one. At last, the moment Laker fans had been waiting for 12 years. The game and the waiting were over. The Lakers had won the NBA championship. They were the winningest team in history. Most wins in a season. Most consecutive wins. And now the World Championship. After 7 heartbreaking tries, Jerry West had more than earned his reward. But this incredible season was a credit to many men. Elgin Baylor gave tradition to the team, created by Fred Shout. Wilt and owner Jack Kent Cook shared in victory. NBA Coach of the Year Bill Sharman had lost his voice, but his Lakers had won everything else. What better way to end the greatest season ever played than with the title? The Los Angeles Lakers, world champions.
2 years after Willis Reed's famous entrance at Madison Square Garden, Wilt made his own dramatic entrance with that sprained wrist. He wasn't even expected to play in Game 5, but had 24 points and 29 rebounds as the Lakers clinched the title. And Chamberlain was named the Finals MVP. 1 year later, he announced his retirement. Wilt departed with 2 championship rings, 4 league MVP awards, and 7 scoring titles. When you add it all up, he was the game's most awesome offensive force. And we'll look at some of the other great centers who followed him in just a moment. Welcome back to Vintage NBA. When Wilt Chamberlain arrived in 1959, no one had ever seen a player with his combination of size, strength, and agility. And no one seemed to have an answer for him, with the possible exception of his longtime rival, Bill Russell. During the 60s, Wilt captured the imagination of basketball fans, and he established a tradition of high-scoring centers. Lou Alcindor, who later became, of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, eventually surpassed Wilt as the NBA's all-time leading scorer. While Chamberlain was known for his strength, Kareem scored with grace and finesse, using his majestic skyhook. In the 80s, there was Moses Malone, one of the hardest working men in basketball. He led the Rockets to the 1981 finals with his relentless style, then won the championship with the '83 Sixers. After Moses left Houston, Hakeem Olajuwon followed in his footsteps. Hakeem led the Rockets to 2 consecutive titles and brought new creativity to the center position with his array of spin moves and fadeaway shots. In 1989, the Admiral docked in San Antonio. The Spurs' David Robinson became the only player ever to win an MVP award, Defensive Player of the Year, the scoring title, and the rebounding title. Meanwhile, Patrick Ewing was revitalizing the New York Knicks. When he arrived in the NBA, he was known for his defense, but he evolved into one of the best jump shooting centers in NBA history. But who's the most like Wilt? There's one player who everyone points to.
The Diesel. It's got to be the Diesel. I don't know a guy who can dominate the game by just pure strength more than he can.
I mean, Wilt, he was bigger, stronger, more athletic than all the centers in the league. The same thing as with Shaquille. Now he's even bigger, more athletic, much stronger physically than the centers in the league. You can't stop Shaquille, just like you couldn't stop Wilt. The only one that could stop them was themselves.
What's unique about, Shaq and Wilt, these guys was fast. These guys get up and down the court.
Low to Olajuwon, deflected by O'Neal. A big man puts it down. Here comes the Diesel. Kobe! A beautiful pass by the Shaq man. Shaq playing point guard.
When it comes to superstar centers, no franchise can top the legacy of the Lakers. It goes all the way back to George Mikan when they were the Minneapolis Lakers. Then came Wilt, then Kareem, and today it's Shaq. But is there any center who can ever measure up to Wilt? We'd like to know what you think, so just drop us an email at NBA.com. You can also browse the NBA history section and check out Wilt's bio, where you'll find out how he became known as the Big Dipper. We'll be right back. In 1973, Wilt Chamberlain closed the books on his record-setting career. Fittingly, his number was retired by not one, but two NBA teams, the Lakers and the Sixers. But that didn't stop teams from trying to lure him back. Even in his 50s, there was talk of a possible Wilt comeback, but it never happened. Still, he's left behind a legacy as imposing as the man himself. Wilt dominated his sport like few athletes ever have, and will always be one of the towering figures in basketball history. Thanks for joining us, everyone, here on Vintage NBA. I'm Robin Roberts, and we'll see you next week.
I introduce to you now the greatest player ever in the history of basketball, Wilt Chamberlain!
This will be a night of thank yous for number 13. I never dreamed of a night like tonight. Thank you.